going to talk about some of the numbers that we face in these states. And for all the talk about where is the president, or how come we haven't heard from him, we have heard from Joe Biden yesterday and last night, but did he say very much? His campaign manager is out there saying, quote, Joe Biden will be the next president of the United States. That should not be said, because we are still counting votes. And just as Joe Biden is telling people to be patient, I've been saying that since election night. If they spent 3 years investigating this president, impeaching this president, we can certainly wait for 3 hours, 3 days, 3 weeks, or 3 months, however long it takes for every legal and on-time vote to be counted. Why, though, did Pennsylvania move Election Day? Your reporter is absolutely right. This very troubling unilateral move by a couple of the Democrats who have power in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, moving Election Day to days later than it is for the rest of us, is very unseemly, and we hope unconstitutional, untenable. There'd be no reason to do that. People had plenty of time to cast their ballots. You saw a record number of people casting their ballots in person, by mail, and yet in Pennsylvania they felt the need to push it a few extra days.
Kellyanne, the president came out on election night and said that he had won, while there were still all these ballots to be counted.
Sure. Yeah, I think what the president was meaning there is that he had won, meaning earlier in the night, he had the race won. People were projecting that some of these states that were supposed to turn blue, like Florida, Ohio, Texas, 3 states where Michael Bloomberg himself alone spent $100 million to turn those states blue, and they're still bright red.
So apparently, a Biden campaign surrogate looking at the mathematical inevitability of a Joe Biden win and suggesting that victory is imminent is a cardinal sin, and yet Donald Trump, days ago, declaring victory before we even had half of the results in is totally permissible. Yup, that sounds like just the right level of double standard for someone who works in the Trump administration. Now, Kellyanne, of course, runs cover and suggests that clearly Trump wasn't saying he won the election, he was simply saying that he won Florida, Ohio, and Texas. So take a listen to this and let me know if it sounds like Donald Trump is only talking about Florida, Ohio, and Texas.
This is a fraud on the American public. This is an embarrassment to our country. We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election. We did win this election. So our goal now is to ensure the integrity for the good of this nation. This is a very big moment. This is a major fraud in our nation. We want the law to be used in a proper manner. So we'll be going to the U.S. Supreme Court. We want all voting to stop. We don't want them to find any ballots at 4 o'clock in the morning and add them to the list, okay? It's a very sad moment. To me, this is a very sad moment, and we will win this, and as far as I'm concerned, we already have won it. So I just want to thank you.
Ah yes, the very ambiguous, frankly, we did win this election. Clearly he was talking about Texas. The irony, too, of Kellyanne admonishing the Biden campaign for alleging that they're not in favor of counting all the votes is that she's there on behalf of Donald Trump. This is the guy who's taken to Twitter in a rampage to get them to literally stop counting votes. He's got his supporters in Michigan chanting, "Stop the count."
Stop the count! 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 Keep her feet up! Stop the count! 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 Keep the feet up!
And on top of that, his campaign has filed lawsuits in Michigan to stop counting until they would allow more observers in, which he lost, and Philadelphia to stop counting until they would allow more observers in, which he also lost. So for Kellyanne Conway to come on air and pretend with a straight face that the Trump campaign's position is to count every ballot is laughable. even by her own standards. And she couches her sanctimonious claim here in the absolutely absurd suggestion that Democrats moved Election Day in Pennsylvania, which is straight disinformation. Election Day was on Election Day, November 3rd. It was not moved, and Pennsylvanians were not allowed to vote a single minute later than anyone else in the United States. What she might be referring to is the fact that mail ballots that were postmarked by Election Day have until November 6th to arrive. That's not changing Election Day, that is allowing Pennsylvanians to vote on November 3rd and then give those legal ballots adequate time to arrive so that they can be counted. And by the way, the reason they needed that extra time to allow ballots to arrive is because Trump decided to install his lackey Louis DeJoy to sabotage the post office. Extending ballot deadlines was necessary only as a result of that. So if Kellyanne Conway is pissed that several days were given for people's ballots to arrive, she should probably take that up with the guy who created those delays in the first place. And look, Kellyanne can do what she does and introduce her usual false equivalencies, but the fact is that when it comes to disinformation, it's only coming from one side, and that's not from the Democrats. Trump himself held a press conference where he claimed from the White House in the middle of an election that he'd have already won if only legal votes were counted.
If you count the legal votes, I easily win. If you count the illegal votes, they can try to steal the election from us. If you count the votes that came in late, we're looking at them very strongly, but a lot of votes came in late. I've already decisively won many critical states, including massive victories in Florida, Iowa, Indiana, Ohio. To name just a few, we won these and many other victories despite historic election interference from big media, big money, and big tech.
So that we're clear, no, Trump did not win easily, and no, there were no illegal votes counted. The fact is that between Trump's illegitimate lawsuits and BS press conferences, there has been an avalanche of disinformation coming from that campaign. Why? Because he knows he's losing and he's too petty and insecure to be seen as a loser, so he needs to pretend that there's fraud. It is political theater. He would rather undermine faith in our most sacred democratic institution than publicly acknowledge the fact that he's losing. Even if it means that half of the country loses faith in our elections, that is what he's willing to sacrifice to nurse his own ego. That is how small this man is. So don't listen to Kellyanne, don't listen to Trump, don't listen to any of these sycophants trotted out by his campaign. Focus on what matters, and that is the votes, because they will all be counted, and the states will certify a winner, and the American people will have chosen a new president. And it won't matter how much of a tantrum Donald Trump throws, because despite his best efforts, that's how democracy works in the United States. If you like this video, please check out my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, where I take a deep dive into the week's most important stories and interview major players in politics, including Kamala Harris, Katie Porter, Adam Schiff, Nancy Pelosi, Eric Swalwell, Mary Trump, Al Franken, Cory Booker, and many, many more. Again, that's No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen, available anywhere you listen to podcasts.